Erich Fromm, Erichfromm. Erich Fromm was a German born social psychologist, psychoanalyst, humanistic philosopher, and democratic socialist. He was associated with what became known as the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. Born on 23rd March 1900 at Frankfurt, the only child of Orthodox Jewish parents, he studied at University of Frankfurt, and then, well, what is important for us to know is psychological theory, and his first seminal work in 1941, Escape from Freedom. Fromm's writings are notable as much for their social and political commentary as for their philosophical and psychological underpinnings. And his second important work was Man for Himself, an inquiry into the psychology of ethics. And most popular book, Eric Fromm's, was The Art of Loving, an international bestseller published in 1956, which recapitulated and complemented the theoretical principles of human nature found in Escape from Freedom and Man for Himself. Now, central to Fromm's worldview was his interpretation of the Talmud, which he began studying as a young man under a rabbi. And his grandfathers, many of them were rabbis. The cornerstone of Fromm's humanistic philosophy is his interpretation of the biblical story of Adam and Eve's exile from the Garden of Eden. Fromm points out that being able to distinguish between good and evil is generally considered to be a virtue, and that biblical scholars generally consider Adam and Eve to have sinned by disobeying God and eating from the tree of knowledge. However, departing from traditional religious orthodoxy, Fromm extolled the virtues of human beings taking independent action and using reason to establish moral values rather than adhering to authoritarian moral values. So Fromm extols the virtues of humans taking independent action and using reason to establish moral values rather than mindlessly adhering to authoritarian moral values. Beyond a simple condemnation of authoritarian value system, Fromm uses the story of Adam and Eve as an allegorical explanation for human biological evolution and an existential angst, asserting that when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, they became aware of themselves as being separate from nature, while still being part of it. This is why they felt naked and ashamed. They had evolved into human beings, conscious of themselves, their own mortality, and their powerlessness before the forces of nature and society, and no longer united with the universe as they were in their instinctive pre-human existence as animals. According to Fromm, the awareness of a disunited human existence is a source of guilt and shame, and the solution to this existential dichotomy is found in the development of one's uniquely human powers of love and reason. However, Fromm distinguished his concept of love from unreflective popular notions as well as Freudian paradoxical love. Fromm considered love to be an interpersonal creative capacity rather than an emotion, and he distinguished this creative capacity from what he considered to be various forms of narcissistic neurosis and sadomasochistic tendencies that are commonly held out as proof of true love. Indeed, Fromm viewed the experience of falling in love as evidence of one's failure to understand the true nature of love, which he believed always had the common elements of care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. So, love has the common elements of care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. From the story of Fromm says, Jonah, who did not wish to save the residents of Nineveh from the consequences of their sin, he uses this as demonstrative of his belief that the qualities of care and responsibility are generally absent from most human relationships. Fromm also asserts that few people in modern society had respect for the autonomy of their fellow human beings, much less the objective knowledge of what other people truly wanted and needed. Fromm believed that freedom was an aspect of human nature and we either embrace or escape. He observed that embracing our freedom of will was healthy, whereas escaping freedom through the use of escape mechanisms was the root of psychological conflicts. Three main escape mechanisms that Fromm outlined are automaton conformity, Automated conformity, blindly following. That is how terrorists are born. That is how fundamentalists, all these religious fundamentalists, zealots, they are automatons and they are conforming mindlessly. That's an escape mechanism from freedom. Authoritarianism. Uh, Authoritarianism is another form of escape mechanism. You bow down to authoritarianism. And destructiveness is another escape mechanism. The three main escape mechanisms that Fromm outlined are automaton conformity, authoritarianism, and destructiveness. Automaton conformity is changing one's ideal self to what is perceived as the preferred type of personality of society. That means losing one's true self. The use of automaton conformity displaces the burden of choice from the self to society. Authoritarianism is allowing oneself to be controlled by another. This removes the freedom of choice almost entirely by submitting that freedom to someone else. Lastly, destructiveness is any process which attempts to eliminate others or the world as a whole to escape freedom. Fromm said that the destruction of the world is the last, almost desperate attempt to save myself from being crushed by it. Escape from freedom. The word biophilia, Biophilia, was frequently used by Fromm as a description of productive psychological orientation and a state of being. For example, in an addendum to his book, The Heart of Man, Its Genius for Good and Evil, Fromm wrote as part of his famous humanist credo, quote, I believe that the man choosing progress can find a new unity through the development of all his human forces, which are produced in three orientations. These can be presented separately or together. Biophilia, love for humanity and nature, and independence and freedom. Fromm postulated six basic needs: relatedness, relationships with others, care, respect, and knowledge; transcendence, creativity while developing a loving and interesting life; rootedness, feeling of belonging; sense of identity, seeing ourselves as a unique person and not and a part of a social group and also as a part; frame of orientation, understanding the world and our place in it; and excitation and stimulation, actively striving for a goal rather than simply mechanically responding. So, six basic needs according to Fromm are relatedness, transcendence, that is creativity; rootedness, feeling of belonging; sense of identity, see yourself as a unique person and part of a social group; frame of orientation, understand the world and your place in it; excitation and stimulation, actively strive for a goal rather than simply respond and drift. Fromm's thesis, The Escape from Freedom, is epitomized in the following passage. The individualized man, referenced by Fromm, is man bereft of primary ties of belonging to nature, family, etc. There is only, quote, there is only one possible productive solution for the relationship of individualized man with his world: his active solidarity with all men, and his spontaneous activity, love and work, which unite him again with the world, not by primary ties, but as a free and independent individual. However, if the economic, social, and political conditions do not offer a basis for the realization of the individuality in the sense just mentioned, while at the same time people have lost those ties which gave them security, this lack makes freedom an unbearable burden. It then becomes identical with doubt, with a kind of life which lacks meaning and direction. Powerful tendencies arise to escape from this kind of freedom into submission or some kind of relationship to man and the world which promises relief from uncertainty, even if it deprives the individual of his freedom. Unquote.